In late 1962, a song swept country radio, holding the #1 spot for an astonishing 11 weeks. With its pleading melody and heartfelt lyrics, "Don't Let Me Cross Over" was more than just a hit, it was a phenomenon. But the real story lies beyond the charts. It lies in the two voices that intertwined, Carl and Pearl Butler. Behind their record-breaking success was not the scandal or tragedy that typically plagues celebrities. Instead, it was a quiet, enduring love story, and a vow made into a song. This is the story of a couple who conquered the world with a heartfelt plea and spent their lives living up to the promise in that song. To understand Carl and Pearl, you have to understand the world that made them, America, in the 1930s and 40s. It's a landscape of deep contrasts, of Dust Bowl poverty and burgeoning industrial hope. In the rolling hills of East Tennessee, life was carved out of hardship and faith. This was a world where music wasn't a commodity, it was a lifeline. This was the world that gave birth to Carl Butler. Born in Knoxville in 1927, Carl wasn't just a child of the Depression. He was a child of the Appalachians. Music was in the very air he breathed. He wasn't born into a musical dynasty, but he was born into a culture where a guitar was as common a tool as a hammer or a plow. As a boy, he'd press his ear to the radio, mesmerized by the powerful, lonesome sound of the man who would become his idol, the king of country music, Roy Acuff. Acuff's voice, filled with what they called the hillbilly hiccup, was the sound of authenticity. It was raw, emotional, and unapologetically rural. For a young Carl Butler, it was a revelation. It wasn't just music. It was a career path, a calling. He saved up his pennies, bought a beat-up guitar, and began the painstaking process of teaching himself to play, mimicking the licks and chords he heard on the Grand Ole Opry broadcasts. His first stage was the front porch, his first audience the fireflies in the twilight. But life, as it so often does, had other plans. Just as Carl was starting to find his voice, the world plunged into war. Like so many young men of his generation, he put his dreams on hold and answered the call to duty. He joined the U.S. Army, trading his guitar for a rifle in the hills of Tennessee for the battlefields of North Africa and Italy. It instills a sense of gravity, an understanding of loss, and a deep appreciation for the simple, quiet moments of peace. When Carl Butler returned home, he wasn't a boy with a dream anymore. He was a man with a purpose, and that purpose was music. He dove back in with the ferocity of someone who understood how fleeting life could be. He formed a band, the Lonesome Pine Boys, and started playing any place that would have them. Smoky honky-tonks, local radio stations, anywhere he could be heard. He got a job as a DJ at WIVK in Knoxville, spinning records by day and playing his own music by night. It was a grind, the hard, unglamorous work of building a career from the ground up. During this time, he managed to catch the ear of one of the most important families in country music history, the Carter family. Mother Maybelle Carter and her daughters, Helen, June, and Anita, saw something special in the earnest young singer from Knoxville. They took him under their wing, offering him encouragement and, crucially, opportunities. He became a regular on their shows, learning about stagecraft, harmony, and the business of music from the very architects of the genre. This wasn't just a lucky break, it was an apprenticeship with royalty. The Carters taught him that the most powerful songs were the ones that told the truth, the ones that spoke to the heart. It was a lesson he would never forget. While Carl was chasing his dream across the back roads of Tennessee, another story was quietly unfolding in Nashville. Pearl D. Jones, born in 1930, also grew up surrounded by music. Her family was steeped in the rich musical traditions of Middle Tennessee. But where Carl was driven by an all-consuming ambition, Pearl's relationship with music was different. For her, it was a source of private joy, a way of connecting with her sisters, a part of the fabric of family life. She had a beautiful, clear voice, a natural gift for harmony that was pure and unassuming. She wasn't chasing the spotlight. The rough and tumble world of honky-tonks and endless touring held little appeal for her. Pearl's dreams were closer to home. She envisioned a life of stability, of family, of being a wife and a mother. A career in the unpredictable, often heartbreaking world of professional music seemed like a world away. She was the steady, gentle soul to Carl's restless, ambitious heart. They were two different melodies, waiting for the right moment to be woven into a single, beautiful harmony. By the early 1960s, Carl was a respected, yet struggling, solo artist. It was then that he was truly captivated by Pearl. He saw in her a warmth and a steadiness that grounded him. She saw in him a passion and a kindness that looked past the stage lights. They fell in love, and in 1962, they were married. Their partnership and their professional destiny ignited almost simultaneously. Their marriage was new, their future together unwritten, when a song landed in Carl's hands that would intertwine their love story with country music history forever. It was a union founded on love, but it was about to be defined in the eyes of the world by a single, powerful plea set to music. Pearl, meanwhile, was content to be Carl's wife and the mother of their children. She was his biggest supporter, his sounding board, his safe harbor from the disappointments of the music business. Occasionally, she would join him on stage to sing a song or two. Her harmony was the perfect complement to his lead vocal, a sweet, soaring counterpoint that added a new layer of emotional depth to his music. People noticed. The chemistry between them was palpable. It wasn't an act, it was real. But the idea of them becoming an official duo was never seriously on the table. The industry at the time was built around solo stars, the charismatic male lead, the girl singer, as a supporting act. A husband and wife sharing equal billing was a rarity, and in the eyes of many record executives, a commercial risk. Carl was the artist, Pearl was his wife. That was the accepted order of things. And so it remained for 10 years. They built a home, raised a family, and navigated the gentle rhythms of a life lived in partnership. Carl kept writing, kept recording, kept touring, always searching for that elusive hit. He was respected, but he wasn't a star. He was on the verge of becoming just another talented singer whose career never quite caught fire. And then, one day he heard a song that would not only change their lives forever, but would also change the course of country music. The year was 1962. The world was on edge, a place of Cold War tensions and burgeoning social change. But in Nashville, the business was business as usual. Music Row was a factory of heartache and honky-tonk, churning out songs for a nation that found solace in tales of love and loss. Carl Butler, after more than a decade of trying, was still on the outside looking in. He had a record deal with Columbia, but the hits weren't coming. The label was growing impatient. There was a quiet pressure building, a sense that his time might be running out. It was in this atmosphere of professional uncertainty that he crossed paths with a songwriter named Penny J. She had written a song that she was pitching around town. It was a simple tune, built on a classic country waltz tempo, but the lyrics were something else entirely. They told a story not of a love that was lost, but of a love that was in danger of being lost. It was a plea, a desperate prayer from one partner to another, begging them not to stray into the arms of a waiting temptation. The central metaphor was powerful and immediate. Love as a river and infidelity as the act of crossing over to the other side. The song was called Don't Let Me Cross Over. When Carl heard it, something inside him clicked. This wasn't just another cheating song. Most songs of that ilk were about the aftermath, the tears, the regret, the slammed doors. This one was about the moment before. It was about the precipice, the terrifying, fragile moment where a choice has to be made. It captured a universal human anxiety, the fear of our own weakness and the desperate hope that the person we love can be our strength. Carl knew, with an instinct born of years of singing in smoky bars and to late-night radio listeners, that this song was a monster hit. But he also knew something else. This was not a song he could sing alone. The story was a dialogue, a conversation between two hearts in crisis. It had to be a duet, and there was only one person in the world he could imagine singing it with, his wife, Pearl. He rushed home, excited, and played the song for her. Pearl, ever the pragmatist, was hesitant. She had never sought the spotlight. Her place was by his side, not sharing it. The vulnerability of the lyrics, the raw emotion they required, was intimidating. She was a private person, and this song felt deeply, intensely personal. But Carl was insistent. He knew with a certainty that bordered on obsession that her voice was the missing piece. Her pure, earnest harmony was the sound of the faithfulness he was singing about. Without her, the song was just a man's lament. With her, it became a shared vow. Reluctantly, Pearl agreed, but convincing his wife was only the first battle. The next one would be with his record label. He took the idea to his producer at Columbia, the legendary Don Law. Law was one of the chief architects of the Nashville sound, a man responsible for hits by giants like Ray Price and Lefty Frizzell. He was a brilliant record man, but he was also a creature of habit. He had been grooming Carl as a solo artist for years. According to industry lore, Law's reaction was dismissive. The public won't accept a husband and wife team, he supposedly said. It just doesn't work. He wanted Carl to record the song solo, or perhaps with an established female session singer. But Carl Butler, the quiet, persistent man, stood his ground. For perhaps the first time in his career, he refused to back down. He told Law, in no uncertain terms, that it was Pearl, or it was no one. The song was meaningless to him without her. It was a gamble, a moment where he put his marriage and his artistic instinct above the conventional wisdom of the most powerful man in the room. He was betting his entire career on a harmony only he could hear. Finally, worn down by Carl's unwavering conviction, Don Law relented. He agreed to one session. They could record the song, but he made no promises. The pressure was immense. They had one shot to prove him wrong. The day of the recording session arrived. The studio was A-list Nashville. The musicians were the legendary A-Team, the same session players who backed Patsy Cline and Elvis Presley. For Carl, this was familiar territory, but for Pearl, it was terrifying. She was surrounded by giants of the industry, a housewife from Franklin, Tennessee, about to sing on a record that her husband's career depended on. The nerves were overwhelming. She was quiet, withdrawn, and filled with self-doubt. The musicians kicked off the song. Carl sang his opening lines, his voice filled with a pleading baritone ache. Then came Pearl's turn. She sang her verse, her voice clear and true but tentative. They tried another take and then another. Something wasn't quite clicking. The technical parts were there, but the raw, desperate emotion that Carl had heard in the song wasn't translating to the tape. The mood in the control room grew tense. Don Law's skepticism seemed to be proving justified. It was then that Carl did something remarkable. He walked over to his wife, stood beside her at the microphone, and took her hand. He looked her in the eyes and away from the microphone spoke to her quietly. No one knows exactly what he said. Perhaps it was a word of encouragement, a reminder of their love, a simple, "I'm here with you." Whatever it was the only direction she needed. They started the next take. This time, when Pearl sang, something had changed. The fear was gone, replaced by a quiet strength. When their voices joined together in the chorus, "Don't let me cross over love's cheating line," it was electric. It wasn't just two singers performing a song. It was a husband and wife making a promise to each other in front of the world. Her voice wasn't just a harmony. It was the answer to his plea. The final take was magic. Everyone in the room knew they had just captured lightning in a bottle. They had done it. They had proven everyone wrong. "Don't Let Me Cross Over" was released in late 1962. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Radio stations were inundated with requests. The song shot up the Billboard Hot Country Singles chart like a rocket. In December, it hit #1, and then it stayed there for 1 week, then 2, then 5. It held the top spot for an astonishing 11 consecutive weeks. Well into 1963, it was a phenomenon, one of the biggest hits in the history of country music up to that point. For a nation living under the shadow of the Cuban Missile Crisis, a nation on the cusp of profound cultural upheaval, the song's message of faithfulness and commitment struck a deep and resonant chord. It was a deeply conservative sentiment wrapped in a beautiful, irresistible package. Carl and Pearl Butler were no longer just a struggling singer and his wife. They were superstars. That same year, in recognition of their monumental success, they were invited to become members of the Grand Ole Opry, the highest honor in country music. In the space of a few short months, they had gone from the brink of obscurity to the absolute pinnacle of their profession. They had crossed over, not to the cheating side, but to a level of fame they had never dared to imagine. And they had done it together, hand in hand. The explosion of "Don't Let Me Cross Over" transformed Carl and Pearl Butler's lives overnight. One moment, they were a family living on a sideman's wages in Franklin, Tennessee. The next, their faces were on album covers and their name was at the top of the bill. The Grand Ole Opry stage, a sacred ground Carl had dreamed of since he was a boy listening to the radio, was now their regular Saturday night workplace. They were living the dream. Their world became a whirlwind of touring television appearances and recording sessions. They were suddenly in high demand, sharing stages with the very idols Carl had grown up worshiping. Yet this new life came with a set of unspoken rules and intense pressures. The industry that had initially doubted them now wanted to capitalize on their success, and that meant keeping the hit machine running. The pressure to produce a follow-up, another blockbuster duet that could capture the magic of their first, was immense. They returned to the studio and released a string of other wonderful duets. Songs like "Loving Arms" and "Too Late to Try Again" were fine records that performed respectably on the charts. They showcased the same beautiful, intuitive harmony and heartfelt delivery, but they couldn't replicate the cultural phenomenon of "Don't Let Me Cross Over." That song had been more than just a hit. It had been a moment in time, a perfect marriage of song, sentiment, and performance. Trying to recreate it was like trying to catch lightning in a bottle for a second time. This is a common story in the music industry, the struggle of the one-hit wonder. But to label Carl and Pearl as such is to miss the point of their story entirely. They weren't a manufactured act. They were a married couple who happened to have a massive hit record. Their identity was not solely defined by their chart position. The real drama of their lives wasn't about chasing another #1. It was about navigating the treacherous waters of fame without losing the very thing that had made them special in the first place, their relationship. The road was grueling. Life in a tour bus playing a different town every night is exhausting for anyone. But for Carl and Pearl, it was complicated by the fact that they were trying to raise a family. They had children at home who needed them. Pearl, in particular, felt the pull of domestic life. She had never been the one with the burning ambition. She loved singing with her husband, but she loved being a mother more. Every night she spent in a different city was a night away from her kids. This created a quiet, internal conflict that she carried with her throughout their years of peak fame. Friends and fellow musicians often observed the dynamic between them backstage at the Opry. Carl was the natural showman. He was affable, loved talking to the press, and was comfortable in the spotlight. He was the engine of their career. Pearl was his anchor. She was often quiet, reserved, preferring to sit and knit while waiting for their turn to go on stage. She radiated a sense of calm amid the chaos. She wasn't antisocial, just centered. Her priority was not the applause or the accolades. It was Carl. She was there for him and with him. This dynamic, however, sometimes led to tension with the business side of Nashville. Record executives and promoters wanted them to play the part of superstars 24/7. They wanted more glamour, more drama, more of the public performance of celebrity. But Carl and Pearl resisted. They were refreshingly normal, a quality that was perhaps detrimental to their long-term commercial success. As musical tastes shifted in the late 60s and 70s, their chart success waned, but their place as beloved members of the Grand Ole Opry was secure. For decades, they remained a mainstay of the show, their performance of Don't Let Me Cross Over evolving from a plea into a testament. The song had become their story, and their story had become the song. When you watched them perform in their later years, you saw the comfortable, unspoken understanding of two people who had shared a lifetime. Carl's health began to fail in the late 1980s, forcing him to retire from the demanding schedule of a performer. The years on the road had taken their toll. True to the vow in their song, Pearl transitioned seamlessly from his on-stage harmony partner to his devoted caretaker at home. The final chapter of their life together was a quiet one, lived far from the Opry stage, proving that their promise was not just for the spotlight, but for life itself in sickness and in health. On September 4th, 1992, Carl Butler died of a heart attack at the age of 65. The country music community mourned the loss of one of its most authentic honky-tonk voices. But the story doesn't end there. The most touching and often overlooked chapter is that of Pearl. After Carl's death, she never remarried. She largely withdrew from public life, embodying the final quiet promise of their song. For nearly 27 years, she lived as his widow, the keeper of their shared memory. Her world, both musical and personal, had lost its most important voice, but she continued to live with quiet dignity. On March 3rd, 2019, Pearl Butler passed away at the age of 89, finally reunited with the love of her life. The news of Pearl Butler's passing, though not unexpected given her age, marked a true end to an era. For fans of traditional country music, it was the final curtain closing on one of the greatest love and musical stories. Her death was not just the loss of an artist, but the completion of a legend. Immediately, online music forums, social media sites, and classic country radio stations were flooded with tributes. The response from fans was more than just grief. It was a wave of deep admiration for her loyalty and devotion. People not only reshared their timeless duets like Don't Let Me Cross Over and Loving Arms, but also commented on the profound meaning Pearl's life gave to those songs. Many fans expressed that in a world where everything is changing rapidly, Pearl's perseverance is an inspiration. She lived up to the lyrics of her song, making the love story on stage a reality until her last breath. There is a sweet consolation in the sadness. The separation that lasted nearly 3 decades is finally over. One popular comment read, "She refused to cross the line alone for so many years. Now she can finally go with him. Carl is waiting for her on the other side." Pearl's death is not just an end, but also the immortalization of their legacy. It solidifies that Carl and Pearl's story is not just about hits, but about a true love that endures beyond time and fame. For fans, Carl and Pearl Butler are no longer two individuals. They are a unique legend, a complete song of love, loss, and eternal reunion. Ultimately, Carl and Pearl Butler's legacy is more profound than a single hit song. It's a story of a promise made and a promise kept. He sang the plea, and she lived as its answer, both during his life and for decades after his death. They left behind not just an immortal song, but an immortal love story, a testament that true fidelity doesn't end when the music stops.